I'm indebted to John, who got in touch with me for the subject of today's video and explained something which helped me understand why trying to get to net zero is extremely unlikely, particularly with energy. If you cast your mind back to the old days, many of us will remember that before wind turbines and solar panels and things, all we had to worry about was getting our barrels of oil from the various sources and the coal and natural gas. And in the old days, that's everything that we needed. The gas being a potential energy was easy to store. The coal, again, being a potential energy. In other words, it's a raw substance that has the potential to be turned into energy and supplied to us in our homes, to our cars, to our factories, to our industry as a source of energy, which means that we can be creative and productive and that we can have reasonable and, in actual fact, a very good lifestyle. Thank you very much. And that's been fine. Then, of course, we started to, or certain factors of society started to become a bit concerned about the planet and said, hang on a minute, burning all these fossil fuels, you know, it's going to cause a man-made global warming. We're all going to die in a horrible, agonizing death. So up comes the idea that instead of using fossil fuels, as I know you know, we've got to get to using renewables, wind and solar, and of course nuclear. And then, whilst that's possibly a noble idea, that if we could not pollute the planet too much with diesel particulates and the nasty off bits of fossil fuels and all of that, the idea that we transition to this new energy is fine, as long as it's in a sensible amount of time. However, we've been battered and bruised over the head to try and do this in a ridiculously short space of time because, you know, horror upon horror, we are told that we've only got 12 years and it's all going to be a nightmare unless we reduce our CO2. So what are we going to do? We're going to get this new energy in. So we've already been building wind turbines and of course we have solar panels here, there and everywhere generating electricity so that we can use it. I mentioned that the fossil fuels had this potential energy. You know, the coal, it sits there as coal, or a barrel of oil sits there as a barrel of oil, or the natural gas can be put into a canister and it can be stored. It can be stored for quite some considerable time and you've lost nothing. But because we're now thinking that these items are not going to be the things that we use to generate electricity at whenever we need them at will, we've got to rely on things like the sun coming out, which sometimes it's sunny and sometimes it's not sunny because of the cloud coverage, and wind, when sometimes it's windy and sometimes it's not windy. Then we've got to rely on this renewable energy and nuclear, of course, but we're not building nuclear power stations in sufficient numbers to actually produce enough energy to be enough to deal with anything. So we've relied on wind and solar. But the thing about electricity isn't like oil and it isn't like coal or gas. You can't just put it in a container and leave it for 20 years and it's still there. If you generate electricity using the sun or the wind, or however you want to generate it, if you've got 100 million hamsters running around a thing and you generate the electricity, you've got to do something with the electricity pretty quickly. You can put it into batteries if you've got enough batteries. We probably don't have enough batteries not to replace what we do with the fossil fuels. But even if you do put it into batteries, you know what batteries are like. They don't hold the electricity in the same way that if you put a whole load of coal into a bunker, the coal will just sit there. Let's face it, the coal has been underneath the earth for millions of years and it's just sat there. In fact, it's sat there making more coal incrementally rather than being reduced. So electricity leaks in the same way that water down pipes. You know what it's like. You put water down a pipe and it's going to a whole network of places. There's a hole here and a hole there. It leaks out. So you need more quantities of water than you actually ever use. And it's the same with electricity. Apparently, if you have electricity and you put it down long wires, you need more electricity at one end than you get at the other end. You lose electricity. If you have pylons, which we do, and you have misty weather, which we also do, you hear it crackling. And apparently, I'm told that is also where electricity gets lost. Electricity can be lost in the transporting of it down the wires through electromagnetism, I think. Don't correct me. You can correct me. Don't quote me on that. But you're leaking it all the time. I know what it's like in batteries with my cameras. If you have a battery, you can put it in your camera. If you leave the camera for several months and you come back and you want to use the camera, you suddenly find the battery has gone down in charge, which is a bit of a nuisance. It means you've got to recharge it. Now, if that's your car and you've got an electric car and it's sitting outside your house, but you know, for whatever reason, you don't use your car for a month or two, the charge is slowly dissipating. Now, remember, you've paid for that electricity to go into your car. And if you've topped it up and then you find that you haven't used the car, you've got to top it up again. You're being charged for your charge every time. So you're sort of being penalised. But if you fill your car up with petrol or diesel, it's not going to leak. It's in a sealed container. You can leave it there a month. You've still got the same amount of diesel as you had when you left it before. And if there is any leakage, it might be a tiny little bit with petrol in the evaporation, but nothing that you could write home about. You're not suddenly finding that your car is 2/3 or 1/3 empty and only 2/3 full, as you can with batteries. So that's an issue that electricity has. It leaks. Now, currently, and I was shown a video, and I watched this video, fascinating to see how much energy we are using in the UK and how the energy is produced. Now, if you equate this to oil, the amount of oil that we use in a big standard issue barrel, oil is measured in barrels, as I'm sure you know. And in this country, every day, on average, we use 1,500,000 barrels of oil a day. A day. 1,500,000 or 1.5 million barrels of oil a day. Now, that's an equivalent to, in terms of electricity, apparently, 750 gigawatts. That oil can be turned into terms of electricity, 750 gigawatts. That's what we use in the UK. In America, it's just under 20 million. We use 1.5 million. America uses 20 million of these barrels of oil every single day, just to get through the day with all the industries and everything else and domestic people and all of that using the oil. So they're huge numbers more than that. And of course, every country has got, we're sort of somewhere in the middle of the usage. There are, China and Japan, far more usage than we have of this oil. So that equates to, for us, 750 gigawatts of oil. Sorry, of electricity potential that we can use a day. The wind at the moment, it's a windy day, and you can go onto a website and see how much electricity is being generated on all the, I think it's about 11,000 wind turbines that have been built over the last 20 odd years. And we are generating about 15 gigawatts of energy from wind. 15. So the oil that we're using is 750 gigawatts. Wind is only doing 15. So if we were to rely just on wind, never mind the solar bit, we would need another 735 gigawatts of wind turbines. I don't know how many wind turbines that is. If 15 gigawatts, it comes from about 11,000 of them spread across the country, only 15. How many, well, what would that be? You're into the hundreds of thousands of wind turbines to produce the 750 gigawatts of energy that we use just for one day. And today's a windy day. What if it's not windy? There's no sun today, so you're not getting anything from the solar, or very, very minimum. Do you see what I'm getting with this? So they think that in 7 years, to get to 2030, when net zero, when we're supposedly got rid of all the fossil fuel, or pretty much all of it, that we will have suddenly magically have replaced all the electrical needs with the wind and the solar. It's laughable. It's not going to happen. Plus the fact, here's another thing to think about. If that's the case, you're going to need charging points everywhere. So you're driving along in your car on the motorway, you've got to go up to, I don't know, you're down in Sussex and you've got to go up to Northumberland or York or somewhere a long journey. Say you've only got to do 300 miles, and let's say your tank in your car or van has about 300 miles capacity. You go into the service station, you fill up 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, depending on how quick you are with the old trigger. You fill up the fuel and away you go. Done. Let's say, and then you get up, then you need to come back again. So you go into another service station, 3 or 4 minutes, you fill up and you can come back. Lovely, productive. Do that with an electric car. Your range might be 300 miles. Let's say it does 300 miles. Very nice, swish car, electric, all very exciting. It's taking you 45 minutes to charge it up, but maybe you did it overnight before you set out. When you get to your destination 300 miles away, and now you want to come back, you've got to wait 45 minutes. That's assuming, of course, that's the minimum time, but that's assuming, of course, that there is a charging point free. Because if everybody's on electric cars, they're all going to be sitting there waiting for 45 minutes or whatever time that they've got. They may go, oh, I've only got 20 minutes. I only need to go 20 miles. Maybe I only need 10 minutes to wait. Meanwhile, the petrol and diesel driver has come in and gone, hi, bye, and has zipped away. Ever so easier and is more productive. But there's not enough charging points. And what we would need to be seeing, if they were serious about having 7 years to achieve this, is the roads would be dug up, these charging points put everywhere, and we would have all these wind turbines and the solar panels on every roof in every land. It would be mandated. You'd have to have these things put onto your house so that we could generate enough electricity to supply the needs that we have currently, that we have with oil. So it just can't happen. So here's the thing. If this can't happen and we're not doing it, we're not digging up the roads, we're not putting in the infrastructure, the question is, we're being sold this is where we've got to go. We've all got to buy electric cars, and by 2030 the oil will be phased out and all of this. If we're not actually doing that, why? Why are we not doing it? Why are we being sold this that we've got to do, right? Yet we haven't got the charging points here, there and everywhere. We're not building the wind farms, and we're not building, and solar panel is not because every bit of farmland would have to have solar panels on it to get enough electricity to be able to do what we need. Now, the government aren't stupid. They may act stupidly, I grant you. They may look stupid, but their advisors are not stupid. They would know. Somebody somewhere would have said to them, now look, hang on a minute. In order to get rid of, to supplant the 750 gigawatts of power, we're nowhere near close, and in 7 years we'll never have the infrastructure. Why are you telling the great world public that we will, when there's absolutely no way that we can? Now the government, they're not going to go, oh yeah, of course we better tell everybody that actually this, they're telling us and they're selling this story, but why? Because they know it can't be done. So what do they know? That when we reach 2030, that they're going to have to hold that, well, the current government won't be in power and the next government won't be in power. It'll be the government after that, 7 years' time. well, maybe by the end of that government, and we'd be going, oh, we didn't make it, didn't it? I don't understand. Is there another reason? Is there another reason why they're selling us this idea of something which is completely impractical? They must know it's impossible because they are not out there getting it done. So I'm very confused. Thank you, John, for this conundrum as we come to the end of 2022 with 7 years to go before so-called net zero. Tell me your thoughts. I'd be fascinated if you've understood and worked out any of this.